A firefighter rescued a puppy from a burning house. Watch his reaction. The thick, acrid stench of smoke clawed at the early morning air as the distant shriek of sirens reverberated through the narrow, suburban street. Neighbors in pajamas and slippers had gathered on the sidewalks, their eyes wide with fear and confusion, scanning for the source of the flames. All around them, the atmosphere crackled with tense anticipation. Nobody yet knew what had sparked the fire at that unassuming single-story home at the end of Magnolia Avenue, but the fear in their voices spoke volumes. Something terrible was happening. Yet at the same time, an odd, humming electricity buzzed through the small crowd, like an unspoken promise that something remarkable was about to unfold. A seasoned firefighter with close-cropped hair and smudges of soot forever etched into the lines of his face had been first on the scene. The moment the call came in residential structure fire, unknown if occupants are inside, his heart pounded with adrenaline, just as it always did. But it was more than that. There was a gnawing sense of urgency in him tonight, as if his instincts were screaming at him to move faster, faster. As soon as the fire engine jolted to a stop, leapt off, barking clear, concise instructions to his team while desperately scanning the front of the home. The flames danced hungrily inside its broken windows, casting flickering shadows across the lawn and turning the into a devil's mask of orange and black. He could barely hear his own voice above the roar. "I want a perimeter check. Someone check the back door. We need to know if there's anyone inside." The rest of the team fanned out in practiced precision, hoses already unfurling, water ready to fight the raging inferno. His gloved hands shook with urgency as he pulled on his protective mask. This was routine, he reminded himself, albeit no less dangerous. In an ideal world, no one would be inside. Yet there was a stubborn feeling in his gut that told him otherwise. Someone or something was in there, and they needed saving. It took mere seconds for the engine crew to smash open the front door, but it felt like an eternity. The thick wooden frame gave way to a rush of superheated air that blasted out from the interior like a furnace exhaling. Orange embers, ablaze with unimaginable heat, danced in the swirling air around his face. He heard the roar of flames multiplying beyond the entryway and an eerie, creaking groan coming from the ceiling beams. They were seconds from collapse. "Check every room," shouted, pushing through the threshold. "We don't have much time." The blackness inside was suffocating, nearly impenetrable without the reflective glare of each firefighter's flashlight. Smoke coiled in every corner, making it impossible to see more than a foot ahead. Every surface felt like it had been scorched by a living beast. His gear, designed to withstand extreme temperatures, felt hot to the touch, and droplets of sweat broke out across his brow. He maneuvered carefully through a narrow hallway, stepping over toppled frames and debris that had been knocked off the walls. To an outsider, it might have appeared nightmarish. A solitary figure weighed down by heavy protective clothing, inches away from swirling flames that threatened to devour every inch of the structure. But inside that chaos, his mind was calculating, scanning, ever on alert for any sign of life. Shattered picture frames crunched under his boots, each second reminding him that someone's memories, someone's normal existence, was being erased by the hungry blaze. The raging fire roared overhead, nibbling at the roof's support beams. He heard a faint noise, a whine. It was barely audible above the pandemonium, yet it tugged at him, pulling him deeper into the heart of the inferno. At first he thought his mind was playing tricks, that it was the screech of a beam or the pop of a transformer outside. But there it was again, a small, high-pitched whimper. It came from deeper inside. "Jake, you hear that?" Called over the radio to one of his colleagues. He could hear only static and the muffled roar of water hoses. No confirmation, only that fading whimper. Something inside him surged with determination. The sounds guided him into what appeared to be a living room. The fire had thoroughly ravaged this area. An old couch was now a blackened skeleton of what it once was, The walls peeled away in monstrous tongues of flame. A framed family portrait lay half-melted on the floor, the happy faces scorched beyond recognition. It was a heartbreak made manifest but pushed the emotions aside. Focus. He had to find the source of that sound. He pressed forward. Then he spotted movement, a tiny shape pressed against the wall behind a smoldering coffee table. A pair of bright eyes reflected his flashlight beam. In that intense moment, it wasn't about heroics or adrenaline. It was about saving a life, no matter how small. It was a puppy, trembling uncontrollably amidst the chaos, eyes wide with terror as the fire closed in. Something about that trembling form struck at his core. Memories of his own beloved dog who'd passed a few years back came rushing forward. He felt his heart twist. He had to get this tiny creature out. He crouched down, ignoring the boiling heat that radiated from the floor. The dog was small, its fur blackened in patches by soot, muzzle streaked with singe marks. Yet despite the scorching reality all around it, saw something in those big, terrified eyes, a desperate plea to be saved. The puppy yelped, stepping gingerly on pads so heated it must have felt like walking on coals. Reached out gently. "I've got you, buddy," he whispered through his mask, his voice hoarse with smoke. The puppy shrank back, momentarily terrified but moved slowly, coaxing it as calmly as the situation allowed. With trembling reluctance, the puppy finally let him scoop it into his arms, pressing its face into the crook of his jacket. Cradling the small life against his chest, surveyed the route back. Flames had spread faster than he'd anticipated. He could feel the heat intensifying by the second, and each breath of air he took felt searing. His flashlight cut through thick smoke, revealing that the hallway from which he'd come was now partially engulfed. Debris rained from the ceiling, threatening to trap them both. Any second, the entire structure could collapse. He radioed his teammates, but their responses were garbled. He had only one way out, back through the front, battling the inferno head-on. Taking a deep breath and tightening his grip on the trembling puppy, braced himself. He had done this dance with danger many times, but now there was the added weight, quite literally, of a fragile life in his arms. His boots pounded against the floor, his mind focusing on the steps he had to take, scanning the walls for a safe path. Every corner spat sparks at him. Every overhead beam threatened to come crashing down. He must have sprinted faster than he ever had before, ducking low to minimize exposure, the puppy clinging to him, its tiny heart thumping like a trapped hummingbird. Heat slammed at them from every angle. Finally, he glimpsed daylight through the swirling black smoke at the front door. The roar of water hoses sounded closer. His vision blurred from the sweat pouring into his eyes, but he kept going, driving himself forward until cool air rushed into his face as he tumbled onto the front lawn. The puppy still held firmly. Another firefighter stepped in to support him, and the two men collapsed together onto the grass. There were gasps and shouts all around. The neighbors on the street corner covered their mouths at the sight, some in tears, some in silent awe. Firefighters quickly advanced on the structure, continuing their battle. His gloved hand instinctively checked the puppy's chest for breathing. There was a faint, rapid heartbeat. The puppy was alive. Relief crashed into with overwhelming force. Only then did he realize how desperately he himself needed fresh air. He tore off his mask, hacking out the bitter smoke. Instantly, paramedics were at his side, checking him, assessing his vitals and trying to pry the puppy away to examine it. But the small creature clung to him with surprising strength, letting out a panicked cry whenever someone else attempted to pick it up. Its tiny body pressed harder against his chest. The paramedics exchanged glances, part concern, part amusement, part respect, and let continue to hold the pup while they administered oxygen. That moment, captured on a dozen cell phones by the onlookers, looked like something out of a dream. The grimy, soot-streaked firefighter sheltering a little puppy, both trembling from the horrors they had just faced. Word spread like wildfire across the neighborhood and beyond, through text messages, social media statuses, and raw, impromptu videos. Later, newscasters would run stories of the firefighter who cradled a pup back to life. But at that moment, none of that existed for. The world around him melted away, leaving only the gentle heaving of the puppy's sides against his jacket and the raw swirl of emotions that coursed through his chest. He felt a tear threaten to escape his eye but fought it back. This was a rescue, yes, but it also stirred something far deeper. Perhaps it was the memory of his childhood dog, Patch, who had once given him nothing but unconditional love. Or maybe it was the realization that the pup had come so close to perishing alone, too scared to cry out for help. Either way, in the midst of the roaring fire hoses and chaotic commands, could sense his heart shifting. The paramedics soon ushered him onto a gurney, concerned about smoke inhalation. The puppy let out a shrill whine when they tried to separate them. Eventually, to keep both calm, they agreed that the puppy would stay curled in his arms for the short ride to the hospital. Though it was an unusual arrangement, every responder present saw how tightly the small creature was bonded to the man who had saved it. Inside the ambulance, the pup's eyes never left his face. As the paramedic placed an oxygen mask over the tiny snout, it let out a pitiful whimper and instinctively stroked its back, murmuring soft, soothing words. Something about the raw desperation of that squeak shattered the stoic wall that, like many firefighters, had built around his emotions. The tears he had held back finally broke free. He turned his face away, hiding it from the paramedics, but the puppy's quivering figure felt every trembling breath he took. When they arrived at the hospital, local news crews had already gathered, cameras at the ready. With so much tragedy unfolding behind him, smoke still billowing from the house, it seemed people longed for a shred of hope, a feel-good story to cling to amidst the smoldering debris. But at that moment, didn't feel like a hero in front of cameras. He was just another man cradling a victim, albeit one with 4 paws and soulful eyes. Still, the crowd parted as he moved, giving him space to carry the puppy carefully into the emergency entrance, where a veterinarian had been called to assist. His own checkup felt like a blur. His mind was consumed with concerns for the puppy. He was placed on a stretcher, administered oxygen, had his vitals recorded, and was scolded by the ER staff for trying to leave his bed to see how the dog was doing. Eventually, once his breathing had stabilized, they let him go to the adjacent veterinary area. A volunteer nurse guided him to a small triage room. There, the puppy was lying on a steel examination table, trembling, with patches of singed fur. A veterinarian knelt beside it, carefully cleaning soot from its eyes and mouth, administering fluids and medication to counteract smoke inhalation. The moment the puppy caught sight of, it whimpered, attempting to push itself off the table to get closer. The vet had to gently restrain the little thing from leaping right into his arms. The veterinarian offered a small smile. "He's stable," she said, "but he's been through a lot of stress. A bit of singed fur, minor burns on the paw pads, and a good amount of smoke inhalation, but nothing too serious. Time will heal most of it with a bit of extra care." His heart soared at the news. He rubbed the puppy's ears while carefully avoiding its burned spots. The pup, exhausted, pressed its nose to his gloved hand, eyes half-lidded. He smiled despite the hollowness in his chest. They had made it, both of them. The question remained. To whom did this puppy belong? Was it part of the family who owned the house? He asked the vet and the ER staff, but no one had answers yet. The local police were working on identifying the residents. All that anyone knew was that the home had belonged to an elderly couple, but they had not been present at the time of the fire. They were found hours later, distraught to learn that their home had burned, but grateful that no human lives were lost. Their children, who came rushing in, clarified that they did not have any pets. They had owned a dog long ago, but that animal had passed away years prior. So, who did this pup belong to? It became a mystery. The pup wore no collar or tags. Social media posts went up, Local organizations were contacted, but there was no immediate answer. For now, the puppy was simply the rescued pup, homeless and ownerless. Late that night, after was discharged, he couldn't shake the pup from his mind. His own small apartment wasn't exactly the perfect place for a dog, but he felt a tug of responsibility. The little guy had no one. So he found himself picking up his phone and calling the veterinarian's after-hours line, asking if he could visit the pup and maybe help care for him. The nurse on duty sounded a bit surprised, but said the puppy was being kept overnight for observation. Was welcome to stop by in the morning. Sleep came in restless fragments haunted by dreams of roaring flames and the sounds of frantic whimpers. He kept jolting awake, heart pounding, as if compelled to leap out of bed and resume some rescue that hadn't yet finished. At dawn, he threw on a sweatshirt and jeans, hopped into his old pickup, and drove straight to the clinic. He had barely finished signing in at the front desk when the same nurse from the night before escorted him in, smiling at his eagerness. Walking into the kennel area, his breath caught in his throat. He spotted the pup in a small enclosure, lying on a padded blanket, one hind leg wrapped in a bandage. When their eyes met, the pup scrambled forward as best it could, front paws pressing excitedly at the wire door, a tail wagging so hard it almost knocked him off balance. It was a greeting so pure and grateful that had to blink away tears. He knelt down, slipping a few fingers through the bars, letting the puppy lick him. With each wet nudge, a swirl of warmth flooded his chest. "Hey, buddy," he murmured softly, "how are you holding up?" The nurse stepped forward with a small chart. "He's doing surprisingly well. No permanent damage. We're estimating he's about 3 or 4 months old, probably a mix of a few breeds. There's some lab in him, maybe. He's pretty tough, all things considered." She turned her gaze to, "He's pretty attached to you, you know. The moment he wakes up, he's whining until someone shows him a picture of you on their phone or calls your name. It's like he knows you're the reason he's alive." Wasn't the kind of man who believed in fate or destiny, at least not consciously. But something was happening at this moment, some intangible link that bound him to this vulnerable creature. Gently, the nurse opened the kennel door. As soon as the latch clicked, the puppy stumbled out, heading straight to, tail wagging. Scooped him up with care, mindful of the bandaged paw. "I don't know if anyone will come forward to claim him," said the nurse. "But if not, eventually, he'll need a home. The veterinarian can keep him for a few more days, maybe, but after that we'll have to send him to a shelter." His mind flashed to his apartment again. It was modest, with only the bare essentials, his schedule often erratic. He was always on call, ready to jump into the next emergency. Adopting a dog, especially a puppy, felt like a monumental responsibility. But as he felt the small body trembling in his arms, a wave of determination settled over him. He had faced far more dangerous and complicated challenges in his life. And even if he didn't have everything perfectly planned, was there a stronger sign than the bond he felt right now, bridging the distance between two battered souls? "I'll take him," heard himself say, the words slipping out before he could even weigh them. "I mean, I can't leave him like this. If no one claims him, I'll do what I need to do to give him a home." The nurse's eyes lit up, relief and happiness mingling on her face. "That's wonderful. We'll need to follow procedure, keep looking for an owner for a few more days, but in the meantime, we'll note that you're ready to foster." And that set the wheels in motion. Over the next week, while the pup continued to recover, came by every day, sometimes twice, to help with feeding and short walks once the bandaged paw had improved. Each time, the puppy greeted him with uncontainable joy, letting out excited yips and frantically wagging that tiny tail. On social media, the story began to spread. Videos of carrying the puppy out of the burning house were shared by strangers across the country. The storyline was simple yet powerful. Firefighter rescues puppy from house fire. Puppy can't stop clinging to him. Clips played on the local news, then on national morning shows, capturing hearts everywhere. Through it all, felt a strange mixture of humility and awe. He hadn't set out to become a viral sensation. He'd been doing his job, saving a life. The only difference was that this time, the life he saved had 4 paws and fur. But the puppy didn't know about the fuss online, about the thousands of people commenting and messaging, praising his heroism. The pup only knew that was safety, warmth, and reassurance in a world that had been reduced to fiery chaos. And for the puppy had become a symbol of new beginnings, of hope in the face of despair, of the unbreakable bond that can form in an instant between two souls that need each other. As the days turned to a week, no one came forward to claim the puppy. Despite a few tips and leads, it became evident that the dog had likely been a stray seeking shelter in the vacant house. With the official waiting period over, finalized the paperwork to adopt him. Standing at the counter, pen in hand, he felt his heart pound with an unexpected intensity. Adopting a dog wasn't a small choice. But a gentle nudge to his calf made him look down, and there was the puppy, bandage off now, looking up at him with trust shining in those big brown eyes. Any doubts evaporated. Signed his name. He decided to name him Ember, though some friends teased that it was a bit on the nose for a dog rescued from a fire. But Ember seemed to fit. From the flames, a small spark of life had survived and ignited something new within, something that glowed with quiet strength. Bringing Ember home for the first time was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. In the small apartment, had cleared a corner in his living room for a dog bed and some toys, and he had carefully puppy-proofed everything he could think of. Ember, initially tentative, sniffed every corner, seemingly disbelieving that this place was real and safe. He'd approach, tail wagging as if to check, is this really ours? Is this where we stay? Over the weeks that followed, they fell into a rhythm. During the day, Ember would lounge around or chew on squeaky toys, some shaped like little firefighter helmets that the station crew humorously gifted him. Evenings were spent in training sessions, with patiently teaching Ember to sit, stay, and lie down. Ember proved eager to please, though he had the spirited energy of a puppy that had discovered life anew. He'd dash around the apartment, skidding into furniture, or race in circles in the small patch of grass behind the building, making it impossible for not to laugh. Every so often, Ember's eyes would cloud with fear at a loud noise that reminded him of the fire, and he would cower, trembling. It broke his heart each time, but he'd gently gather Ember into his arms, whispering comfort. Gradually, those episodes became less frequent. Life, however, never stops for introspection. As the viral story of an Ember continued to spread, found himself busier than ever. The station's phone rang constantly with interview requests, invitations to appear on talk shows, even a pet food brand wanting him and Ember in a commercial. He politely declined most offers, not wanting the attention. His main goal was to do his job and give Ember a good home. Still, some requests were harder to refuse. One day, the fire chief pulled aside and explained that the local children's hospital had requested a visit. They hoped that could bring Ember to cheer up some of the kids who were going through tough times. "I know this isn't exactly in your job description," the chief said, his grizzled voice warm with encouragement. "But these kids, they'd love to meet him. The whole story has inspired them. It might be worth it." Hesitated. He wasn't used to the spotlight. But the thought of brightening a child's day with Ember's story made his heart stir. So one sunlit Saturday, put Ember's new collar on, bright red with tiny embroidered flames that the station had jokingly gifted him, and drove over to the hospital. Inside, a small group of kids, some in wheelchairs, some with IV poles, waited in a rec room decorated with bright posters and balloons. They lit up when walked in, Ember at his side. It was as if a spark of pure, radiant energy lit the room. Gently, knelt down so that Ember could greet them one by one, carefully sniffing each little hand, occasionally giving a tiny lick. The giggles, the wide-eyed wonder, the squeals of delight, felt each like a healing balm in a world that often seemed filled with tragedy. One girl, no more than 8, with bandages on her arms, petted Ember quietly, tears gathering in her eyes. "He's so brave," she whispered, "and so are you." Felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't sure how to respond, how to explain that Ember's bravery was something that existed without words, that the real heroes were the kids enduring their own battles every day. He reached out and gave the girl a gentle pat on the shoulder. "He is, and so are you. You're braver than I'll ever be." Ember offered a small, friendly lick, as if sealing sentiment. The girl smiled, a small but infinitely powerful smile. Felt his eyes mist, suddenly aware of the fragile beauty of this moment. Once again, Ember had become more than just a rescue pup. He was a beacon of hope, an embodiment of resilience. The entire visit reminded that hope could spread like ripples in a pond, each small act of kindness radiating outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes came home after a harrowing shift, the smell of smoke still tangled in his hair, the memory of some tragedy weighing on his shoulders. Ember could sense when was upset, bounding over with an insistent wag, pressing his nose into his hand as if demanding he pay attention. On such nights, would drop to his knees, hugging Ember tight, letting the day's darkness seep away in the face of Ember's unwavering affection. And there were also playful days when Team would invite Ember to the fire station. The pup quickly learned to love the place, so many friendly humans to greet, so many interesting smells. The station's rescue dog, an older Dalmatian named Scout, took Ember under her wing, occasionally tolerating the pup's bounding energy. The camaraderie that grew around Ember boosted morale. Started calling him Little Hero, or sometimes Ash, though Ember was the name that stuck. As the months rolled by, both and Ember continued to be recognized around town. The once viral story never truly disappeared. People would approach them on the sidewalk, children asking to pet the heroic pup, grown adults offering heartfelt thanks for service to the community. Initially uncomfortable with the attention, grew to appreciate the sense of unity it fostered. Everyone in some way was looking for a story of hope, of salvation, of unconditional love. Ember's story had become a kind of living testament to the endurance of both man and animal in the face of adversity. Yet amid all that positivity, life had a way of throwing curveballs. One evening, while was at the station, a call came in for another house fire, this one more severe than the last. The details were grim. A multi-story building, multiple families inside, thick smoke reported by neighbors. His heart pounded with the same adrenaline, but an extra jolt of fear slid through him now that he had someone waiting for him at home. Would Ember lose him to the very same threat he had once been rescued from? Didn't have the luxury to dwell. The minute they arrived on the scene, it was chaos. Flames tore through the upper floors, threatening to jump to neighboring houses. Families, children in pajamas, were gathered on the sidewalk, some wailing about pets or loved ones who might still be inside. This was the moment when training overrode fear, and his crew sprang into action. Hoses aimed at the fire, a frantic search to ensure no one was trapped within. At one point, was scaling a ladder to the second floor, thick smoke pouring out the window. He could feel the rungs vibrating with the frantic movement of the rest of his crew. For a moment, the swirling blackness and the flickering light of the flames transported him back to that day he'd found Ember, that day he'd first heard that frightened whimper. He could almost feel the weight of Ember in his arms again, hear the pounding of his own heart. But he shook the memory away, focusing on the rescue at hand. In a twist of harrowing fate once inside, he indeed heard a noise, a frightened cry. But this time it was no puppy. It was a child, trapped in a room with smoke so thick it was almost visible as a dark wave. Pushed forward, his thermal imaging camera picked up a small figure huddled in the corner of a back bedroom, trembling and coughing. Adrenaline surging, barreled through the flame-licked debris and scooped the child into his arms. The boy's face was smudged with soot, tears carving tracks through the dirt. Reversing his path, found the window he had entered. The ladder was still in place, but flames were creeping closer. Carefully, he balanced the child on his hip, supporting his head as they stepped out onto the ladder, rung by rung. The heat pressed against gear. Below, firefighters shouted, holding the ladder, urging him down. A giddy sense of triumph ignited in him. They would make it. When his boots touched the ground, cheers and sobs mingled in the air. Paramedics rushed over, taking the child from his arms. The weight of what had just happened hit him all at once. His mind flashed to Ember again, of how much they meant to each other, and how saving a life, be it a puppy or a human child, never lost its gravity. In that moment, realized that, for him, rescue wasn't just a job, it was his calling, his purpose. And Ember was the living proof that from devastation, beautiful bonds could form. News crews arrived, capturing silhouette against the flames, but he barely noticed. His mind zeroed in on one thought: I have to go home safe, for Ember, for us. Hours later, worn out but relieved, returned to the station. The child had been stabilized, no serious injuries. The building was heavily damaged but not entirely lost. Another day, another fire quenched, another life saved. Collected his things, hopped into his pickup and drove to his apartment. It was nearly dawn, but as soon as he unlocked the door, Ember, groggy yet excited, scampered up to him, tail furiously wagging. Scooped up the dog, burying his face in Ember's fur, feeling the tension of the night's events seep away. "I'm okay," he whispered. "We're both okay." Ember, as if understanding, nestled close, eyes closing in contentment. Word of second rescue made the rounds again. Firefighter, who saved a puppy last year, rescues a child from burning home, and the story took on a renewed life of its own. More requests for interviews poured in, and even a few locals began joking that was like a real-life superhero, always stepping in when flames threatened to take a life. Despite the attention, remained deeply humble about it. A job well done meant a life spared, not a trophy. Still, in moments of quiet, the magnitude of it all would settle over him. He'd be lying in bed, Ember curled at his feet, and he'd think about how a single moment of action could reverberate so far and wide. About how he had changed Ember's life, and how Ember had changed his in return. And about how that ripple seemed to extend outwards, touching countless people who found hope in their story. The relationship between and Ember deepened. Ember's injuries healed fully, leaving only a small scar on one paw. He grew bigger, more confident. His once scrawny frame filled out with muscle, and his coat became glossy. Everywhere they went, whether strolling in the park or dropping by the station, people recognized Ember, eager to pet him, to share how his story of survival had given them hope during a tough time. One woman confided that she had been on the verge of giving up chemotherapy, but seeing Ember's perseverance reminded her to keep fighting. Another man admitted that he had lost everything in a fire years ago, and that witnessing's compassion for Ember rekindled his faith in humanity. Every confession, every genuine expression of gratitude fueled sense of purpose. He started volunteering more at local shelters, determined to help other animals in need. Sometimes, he even brought Ember along to interact with shy or traumatized dogs, demonstrating that tomorrow can be brighter than today. In a strange way, the day kicked down that burning door and found Ember had lit a spark of compassion in him that now spread to everything he did. Months turned into a year. The season shifted to a crisp autumn, the leaves transforming into a patchwork of gold, red, and orange, colors reminiscent of the flames that had once threatened Ember's life. On a particularly cool day, found himself taking a quiet walk with Ember along the winding path in the local park. The air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves. Ember trotted beside him, occasionally nosing at a leaf that caught his interest. They paused by the edge of a small pond, where the reflection of fiery foliage danced upon the water's surface. For a while they just watched the ducks paddle around. A serenity settled in. Knelt beside Ember, scratching him behind the ears. The pup leaned in happily. "You know," began, the words coming out softly, The day I found you, I don't know. Maybe I was as lost as you were, tired, worn out, wondering if everything I did even made a difference in a world that kept throwing tragedy our way. But then you came along and everything shifted. Ember wagged his tail, ears perked up as if absorbing every word, smiled wryly. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you for showing me that sometimes in the darkest moments we find something worth living for, worth fighting for. A gust of wind stirred the leaves around them, creating a gentle swirl of colors. In the distance, heard the faint laughter of children playing in the park, a reminder that life goes on, that joy persists even after the harshest storms. At that moment, something strange and subtle occurred. Ember lifted his muzzle, scanning the tree line as if sensing a presence or a memory. For a brief second, his ears flattened, and a low whine escaped him. Looked around but saw nothing unusual, just families, joggers, and strollers passing by, each lost in their own world. Still, Ember seemed transfixed. Perhaps he was recalling the day the world had nearly ended in flames for him, or perhaps he was simply intrigued by a squirrel in the branches overhead. Regardless, rested a hand on Ember's head. "You're safe," he murmured. "I'm here." Ember relaxed, leaning against Sleg. In the quiet hush of that autumn afternoon, an unspoken bond pulsed between them, two souls who had faced the fire and found solace in each other. The moment felt so poignant, so saturated with unspoken emotion, that suddenly had the urge to share it. It was unlike him to be so public about personal feelings. But this story, the story of a puppy rescued from a burning house, who then rescued his savior from life's darker corners, did not truly belong to him alone. It belonged to everyone who had been touched by it. So taking out his phone, snapped a quick photo. Ember beside the pond, the autumn leaves catching the light in a halo around him. A second later, posted it with a simple caption. "Through fire and fear we found each other, and a new life began. Rescue dog never give up." He hadn't expected more than a few likes from friends, but within minutes, the post began to gain traction. Comments poured in, people from across the country, and even from other countries, chiming in with messages of love, gratitude, and personal stories of resilience. It was as if Ember, with his bright eyes and wagging tail, had become a universal symbol of hope. Stories surfaced of strangers who'd adopted rescue animals in Ember's name, of folks who decided to volunteer at shelters after being inspired by that viral rescue video. And there were some who admitted they had been on the verge of losing faith, but found strength in the simple, undeniable truth that goodness could spark in the midst of a raging inferno. Scrolling through the flood of responses, felt his heart swell. He ruffled Ember's ears once more. "Looks like you're a star again, buddy." Ember cocked his head, clueless to the concept of internet fame but delighted to have attention. Realized that although the attention might fade in time, the impact would remain. Because every person who read Ember's story and felt something stir inside them, some ray of hope, some nudge toward compassion, carried that spark forward. And that was how love spread, how hearts opened, how lives changed, one small ember at a time. In the end, the real story wasn't just about a firefighter pulling a puppy from a burning house. It was about how that single moment forever altered two lives, and how the resulting connection radiated outward, lighting up countless others. It was about the power of rescue, how saving something vulnerable can save us in return. It was about the breathtaking fragility of life, how every heartbeat matters, and how the smallest whimper in the darkness can call forth our greatest acts of heroism. It was about remembering, even in the thick of the flames, that hope can emerge from the ashes if we dare to reach out and take hold of it. As day drifted into dusk in that quiet park, Ember looked up with unwavering devotion in his eyes, and returned the gaze with gratitude too profound for words. They walked home together side by side, the fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet, the sky glowing with a fiery sunset. And if you'd been standing on that path watching them go, you might have felt it, a certain shiver, a subtle spark in the air. It was the feeling that in a world sometimes overshadowed by darkness, each of us carries the capacity to be the light for another soul. A single act of courage can ripple across dozens, hundreds, or thousands of lives, igniting hearts in a chain reaction of compassion. And if you followed them farther, you would see them disappear around the bend. The soldier of mercy and the puppy who survived the inferno, bound by an unbreakable thread of fate. A reminder that the simplest acts of love and courage often leave the deepest, most enduring marks on our world. Long after they vanished from view, their story remained, lingering like a glowing ember, urging us all to remember. A single rescue might just spark 1,000 more, and sometimes, in saving another, we unknowingly save ourselves.